living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Oh, wow. Welcome to the show. What an amazing day it is. I'm live. We're here right on the Republic Broadcasting Network, and it's been, wow, what a week, and what an amazing time to be alive, and it's always my pleasure to be able to come here and do this every week. And I have so much to talk about, a lot to do with the network, and you probably know more than I do. That's what's amazing about it. But for all the changes that could come and will come, I just still have this amazing feeling about what we do here each week on this show, not to mention what happens across the network. And so I just can't wait to dive in. I had planned to do a show today on procrastinating, but we'll do that another day. I'm joking. I know it's terrible, horrible joke to make. But this is not a joke. Let me tell you what's happening on the show today and how you can help out. And we'll talk about how that relates to the network and the future of the show and the future of the network. And it's amazing how these things always come together for me in the context of talking about the show and what it means and what I do. And then, of course, in the context of talking about procrastinating and prioritizing and what that can mean to some people. Maybe it's easy for you. It's one of those things that comes natural to you, that you just do it. You're a person who prefers to be organized and have everything in order as you go into something, anything really. And then there are other people that's hard work. That's work on top of the work that needs to be done. And if you haven't guessed, I'm the latter in that conversation without question. That I always have been. I'm not necessarily the person who waits till the last minute to do something, but I'm not afraid to wait till the last minute to do something. It's been something that I've been able to do all of my life, and in terms of just having to keep up with the norm, it's not that hard. That's basically what I'm saying. It's not that hard to keep up with what's considered normal. What's considered normal is real base, real simple, and so it's never been high priority for me to jump out there and try to get ahead of something. And so I procrastinate as much, if not more, than anybody. Everybody does it, and it's funny. I liken the post as I'm sharing things across the social media. One of the things that Facebook asks you is, what's on your mind? Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind. A whole bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. A whole bunch of things that aren't important. And a lot of them are things that you end up finding reasons to procrastinate, doing other more, I'll say, productive, useful things. That's all relative. That's part of the problem, and that's why I don't have a big sense of needing to prioritize or hurry into things. I'm very happy. In fact, I think it's probably a smart thing to do, to take your time going into those things. That's my preparedness, I guess, is just as I'm going through the process, I'm not trying to rush through it. I'm learning I'm the guy that's always behind in the role playing game. I'm the guy that's at the back of the party because I'm absorbing everything. I'm taking in everything. I'm looking around. I don't want to slip on the trap. I'm not I'm not the guy that just runs headlong. What is it? What's his name? They have a name for that character now that runs headlong into the battle. He's the first one to dive into. It'll come to me, I'm sure, at some point. It's Jenkins. What's the rest of the name? Leroy. There it is. Told you it would come to me. Leroy Jenkins. That's the term for the opposite of me. That guy that just rushes into everything and that guy. Everybody wants to follow him because they don't want him to die. We're all part of the party, and we're all trying to survive the thing. But I think more people are like me, and they would rather just cruise along and take in the beauty and search for the treasure and find the value in participating in this thing at all. And this is, obviously, if you haven't figured it out, it's a metaphor for life. So the procrastinating and prioritizing thing, it only works for me just so much. And proof of it is I literally at 12:03 a.m. this morning decided to do this, to talk about procrastinating and prioritizing. And it's in an effort, obviously, to communicate with you and have you take something of value away from it. But again, the show is very self-centered. It's about me. I talk to the people that I want to talk to about the subjects that I want to talk. I'm not doing the news, and I'm obviously probably too obnoxiously open about what it is that I'm doing here and what it takes to make all of this happen. But I don't really believe that that's possibly true. I think people would much rather have me just chat with my guest or somebody the whole time than listen to me sort of ramble on about some of these things. But that's always going to be true. So it's about me, and so I want to talk to myself. I want to talk to you about procrastinating and prioritizing and how much it works for you. And it's in relation to the show, in the idea that it's very hard work to book people to talk to, that it isn't just having a conversation because you have a platform to have a conversation with somebody. You understand what I'm saying? As opposed to having a conversation with somebody who is, I don't want to say interesting because everybody's interesting, but they have more of a story to tell. There's a reason behind having the individual there, as opposed to, again, just having, I have any number of friends, thousands of them around the world, and dozens, two or three friends in the real world that I could tap to come in here on the show every week and talk to me. But I think that part of the reason that I have to do some of these shows just like this by myself, and why I force myself to do it, is not because I'm lazy or because that's hard work. It's tough being rejected, and it's tough getting past all the gatekeepers to get bigger and bigger guests. The higher up the chain you want to go, the harder it is to get that actual individual's attention, and you almost have to be somebody who's dancing around waving a flag or something on social media and get to catch some of their attention. You almost have to go negative to get their attention. It's a frustrating process, and so I don't necessarily care to participate in it any more than I have to. And so if something doesn't work out and a guest can't be here, and I know it, I'm not necessarily inclined to just try to shoehorn some other conversation in. I would rather just go through my week and and do my normal thing. And if it happens, if somebody else can fill the spot, whatever, then so be it. Then somebody will be here, and we'll have a conversation. And who knows about what? Otherwise, it's that opportunity for me to do all of the basics and just to talk to you, it not have you just listening in to my conversation, but for me to speak directly to you about the show, about the ideas behind Toward Anarchy, about myself, things that are happening in my life. I re-upped my man card yesterday and put some new wheel hub assemblies on the car, so that there wasn't every time I'd make it started out every time I'd make a right turn, it'd be a tip tap, just a oh, okay, all right, well, that's annoying. And then it was sort of every time I'd brake, tap tap, tap tap, and nothing at high speed. I didn't hear anything, feel anything. But then it got to bang, bang, real quick, and a bearing had gone out on the rear driver's side, and so I replaced both wheel assemblies and re-up my man card. I could talk to you about things like that, and you can sympathize with me because I'm talking to you personally. I'm not just talking about it. You have the opportunity to think for yourself because I'm addressing you. You're not just trying to keep up with the conversation. I'm speaking to you. You think about, oh yeah, I need to do that. I've been procrastinating, and trust me, I've been procrastinating on that. I let it go as long as I could, but that's about my garage being full right now of product for the comic book store and for my own sales on eBay, and the garage door being broke, and it hasn't been fixed yet because it's a 40-year-old lift on it's old. I mean, it's old, and this you wouldn't believe this thing. I didn't believe it. I had to climb up there myself. The chain spun off. It's a big motorcycle, bike chain kind of thing, and it goes all the way over to the door, and this chain lifts up this heavy door. This thing's ridiculous. It's a solid one. It's not one of these doors that's hollow, only one layer. It's a big, heavy door, and I can't believe after looking up there, it spun this chain and it's spitting outside the door, and it's actually hanging on the outside, and I have to pull it all back inside the door and try to realign it and see if I can get it back up there. And I get up to the unit itself, and I see on there it's just bent just over, but it's broken off. There's just a little piece holding on, and it's just this itty bitty little gear. It's just tiny. It's like the size of a quarter at the most, and it's lifting this gigantic heavy door on this chain, and there's all the leverage issues and things going on there for it being one direction and the door being another direction, and then having to lift it. There's all sorts of science and math there that just goes, wow, man. And it can't be repaired. It's sheared off. It's actually the mount for the gear is a part of the casing of the garage door opener. The whole thing is just amazing. That holds whatever motor is underneath that holds that gear in place. So it was really a part of it, and it's just sheared off. And it's a rental, so I'm not in a hurry to do anything about it because it's not my problem. But there are all these reasons why I've been procrastinating. It's every little thing. I got to get my hands dirty. I don't own a decent breaker bar at the moment, so I had to solve that problem. I had to go out and buy myself a 25-inch, half-inch drive breaker bar, and so I'd be able to take the hub assembly off the vehicle once I got the wheel and the brake cover off of it, and just all these things that are going through my head, and I can't pull it in the garage, so I'm going to have to do it in the driveway, and I have to jack it up, and my jack isn't it's a great jack. It works perfectly. It's fine. It even has a rotating neck so I can move it around, but it's still just a small sort of garage mechanic jack. It's not a decent one. That's wrong phrasing. It's a great jack. It's fine, but it's not what I'd like to have. The $100 jack that has the bigger base on it and the wider wheelbase, and you just slide it. It's like the jack you picture on the race cars. They slide it right up there, just a couple of pumps, the thing is in the air. That's a jack, baby. All these reasons to procrastinate, but then you get forced prioritization. That's what happens. You don't take the opportunity, the natural opportunity to prioritize things, put them in some sort of semblance of order that you can possibly address the things, and then it becomes forced upon you because it becomes a matter of, well, if I don't do it now, I may lose a wheel driving down the street, and there are a whole bunch of implications that go along with that, the worst of which being that I'm stuck on the side of the street, and then I have to fix this car again in an emergency, in a bad situation, instead of just dealing with the problem to begin with. There was some parable or something that I came across here recently that relates entirely to this, and it was just about this guy talking about how there was a broken window, and no, this is not the economic thing, but in a sense it is, though, because he broke the basement window for some reason, and they didn't want to get it fixed because it was a special cut, a special glass, something, whatever. It was going to be expensive, and it just wasn't something he wanted to do at the time, and he kept putting it off. And of course, then some water got in there, and there was some damage, and then in the end, ultimately, it ended up costing him so much more to deal with that little problem, even though it was just a little problem, and he failed to prioritize it. And I think we all are victims of ourselves in that sense. We do things like that to ourselves, and so that'll be the lesson of the show. I don't have a guest for today because I didn't procrastinate, but I didn't prioritize either. I didn't make it a priority, because then I can come here and I can do the basics. I can tell you, go to towardanarchy.com. I can tell you about supporting the show and supporting the network, and I need to do that, and I will. We're going to slip into a break here in just a moment, but when we come back, I'll tell you about that. The things that are going on at the network that happened here over the last couple of days. And you probably know, if you're a live listener, you probably know. But for people who listen to the show later, and there are a lot of people who do, thank you. Jeez, I'm at 20 gigs already for the month, and it's what? It's the 7th? Yeah, it is the 7th. Look for November 7th when you get to towardanarchy.com, and you'll see procrastinating and prioritizing. That'll be just sort of my theme of the show as I talk about different things. I have tons of things that we could wander off into. I'll try not to spend too much time talking about vaccines. Really, I will, because it's just everywhere. It pops into every conversation. Maybe I'll talk about the importance of, let's put that down, importance of prioritizing conversations. That's important too. Prioritizing conversation, convos, just so it's a note. Now, we'll see if we come back to that and see if I can remember exactly what I mean by that, because that's another thing that popped into my head this week that I think I'd love to talk to you about and float to you. And talk to you again in this conversation about procrastinating and prioritizing, and how much value it may or may not offer to you as an individual. But I tell you, just something as simple as creating a list will always help. And I make myself do it a little bit more and a little bit more every single day, and it's paid off here recently. I'll tell you about it when we get back from the break. So I I mentioned a couple of things before we went into the break, and so I will address those things thusly as promised. First was just a simple idea of creating some lists, and it's something that I make myself do more and more. It's been part of my growth and development in this show and producing this little weekly thing that goes on here. This little party I have. I just trying to make sure that some ideas that I have for what to do don't get left behind. It helps to make a list. And then, of course, I have my little notebook. I tried not using it for a little while. I tried being undisciplined with it, and it was fine. There was no problem with it. But I like the idea of having that pen and piece of paper here to write things. Last week's show with Dr. Dean Lloyd and the conversation that we had about grief and loss and all that. I mean, I made a whole bunch of notes on that conversation, and I didn't do that on our previous conversation. I already had all these things that I had read and dove into the conversation, and it was fine, but it wasn't quite the same. It doesn't stick with you as well for me. I think for anybody, it makes sense that if you it's the simple idea of when you meet somebody for the first time, you shake their hand and you're introduced to them, that you say their name back to them. So you solidify their name, you look them in the eye, you solidify the name and the face in your brain, because you only have just so many of those connections that your brain is really capable of managing anyway. I think they've proven that. So it's a simple notion, the whole thing of just leaving a simple idea, note, record, something for yourself that you can come back and reference to make sure that you're still on track. And it's probably the best. It's probably, I wouldn't be surprised. I've never read one of those 7 Things Billionaires. I've never read one of those books, but I bet one of the top things is that they make notes for that. They take notes, they make notes, they leave themselves lists of things to do. I'm sure some of them are even worse. I mentioned how I can't imagine being a rich person, someone who has to manage wealth in those terms, because it's hard enough to manage it when you have it in small doses and protect it and to grow it, and how much more time you have to spend on that aspect of it. And I think obviously that's true. It's shown in every little Hallmark television show about the dad who works too much and then finally sees the light and comes home and spends time with it. You get the idea. So I've made some lists, and I've accomplished a few things here recently. I added a chat function to the website. I've not made that public yet. It will be public by the next time Dean Lloyd is with us, so that we can try to get maybe some live conversation going. And I'll talk more about the chat and what you can do with it. And it's just a connection to my Messenger account on Toward Anarchy, plugged into the website. It's really, really cool. And you're like, oh, I don't use Messenger. You don't have to. There's guest accounts. It's one of the reasons I went ahead and chose it. There's guest accounts, and I'm not going to be talking to you about anything that is dangerous or sensitive or is information that needs to be protected. So I don't care if I want them to see. I want some algorithm, some people somewhere to see those conversations and go, God, these people are reasonable, and maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And what we're doing, I didn't know something like that would ever happen. But I made the list. I added the chat. I added the email list. You have to do that for us. Get on the email list. It's growing each week already now. It's really cool to see, and fun as always. just trying the new things and finding ways to reach people. It's always a great experience. And so those are just a couple of things that I put on the list recently and that I've been able to check off. And I was happy about that, and that fit right in with this conversation. But in relation to the network and what's going on, you hear the commercial about donating and contributing to the network. We just want you to stop any PayPal donations. You can still get donations, but call the network. We rely on you guys. I mean, the network is entirely funded by you guys and the little bit of advertising that's been done. And you see that yourself, that there's just a little bit. And so reach out to the network before you make a donation. Right now there are some changes, and I'll explain some more of that when we come back from this break here. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
They are just killing me today. One of the few times in any given year, particularly since I don't live in Denver anymore, that I get an opportunity to catch a Broncos game, and it happens to be against Dallas, which Dallas is one of the great teams in the NFL this year. They're tough. They're 6-1, and just the defense is strong, and aside from all the things that come with everything that's involved right now in trying to maintain a team between COVID protocols and injuries and all these silly things that have to be dealt with just to keep some guys on the field. Both teams, the Broncos and Dallas, have probably done better than a lot of people have expected them to this season, and they're both really top teams. I think Denver has like the number 6 defense. Again, I don't get to watch pay too much attention to it at all. I'm certainly not looking for information about it during the season. Everything that I catch happens to be if I turn it on a Sunday, and you see where I spend my Sundays, so I'm not spending that much time watching a lot of football, but it's really great to see the Broncos right now winning 16-0 over Dallas being such a good team, and knowing that the Broncos are in this sort of rebuild state. In fact, they just got rid of Von Miller. I couldn't believe it. But then when I saw what they ended up shuffling around for, and what the new defensive backfield looks like there, and really the line itself, it's obvious that they're taking some of the hits in making it a younger defense, something to match the offense and the new quarterback's potentials. They're really not. I don't think they're decided on Teddy Bridgewater yet 100%. I think his future with the Broncos depends on how he goes, how this season comes out for them, and those things all remain to be seen. But if they do really well, obviously with Teddy at the back of in the field, on the field there, throwing the ball, he'll probably stay around, probably. But they're killing me because I finally get to enjoy a Bronco game. The home team for me. I know the network is there in Texas, and you're all rooting for Dallas, whatever that is, except for the Houston fans. But I lived in Texas for a number of years during my youth, and I supported the home team when I was there. Kansas, I'm in Kansas. It doesn't have a team. You hear Kansas City Chiefs, but that's Missouri. They're in Missouri. They're not a Kansas team. And I'm from Denver. So Denver is my favorite team, and they do well, and they've entertained me over the years, and I watched them win some Super Bowls, and they've been good entertainment, and so I like to see them succeed. And I one of the few times that I get in there and get to really sort of want to listen to what they're saying about the the different players because I don't know any of their names. Or I know who Teddy Bridgewater is, but I can't tell you who the all the different players on the team are. I don't know the new tight ends. I don't know. It's all still very familiar to me, unfamiliar to me, even 8 games into the season, and they're all dressed in now the players, all the coaches, sidelines, the Fox announcing team. It's camouflage everywhere, and they're supporting the troops, and there's this murder porn stories going on pregame where they're talking about these stories of these guys who voluntarily signed up to join the military, and then they end up dying for it. And it's hard to sympathize with people who want war. Live by the sword, die by the sword. My Christian brothers, what's up? Stand up and tell me what exactly that means. If it doesn't mean for somebody who becomes a hired killer for the state, then who the hell is it talking to? So it makes it a little bit rough. And hey, he's there. I know with you. He did the coin toss. He was out there. I think it was the coin toss. I didn't catch the very beginning of the game because I was preparing for the show, but I saw him. They were just showing pictures of it during one of the replays during the halftime during the commercial. So again, I'm just sort of catching this all peripherally, but he was obviously there. Wow, that was that was an interesting play. Okay, so sorry. Away from all that, it was tough. Man, there's a Bronco game on, and I have to sit through all this sort of status nonsense. So what happened this week with the network, if you haven't already heard, I assume you have. Remember, I'm the Sunday afternoon guy on the church-going crowds network. I just do the one show. I'm like the weekend overnight guy at a radio station. Okay, I don't know a lot of what's going on at the network, and I'm not that involved. I'm very disconnected from it, and so I rely on just sort of trickle down information, as it were, so to get my information through the producers or an email list or something like that, quite literally, of fans of the shows and the network, talking about what's happened. So it's obvious if you're talking about it before I knew about it, you already knew about it. But John Stadmiller, the founder of the network and a host of his own shows and just put his heart and soul, everything into what is RBN to create what it is now. He passed this week, and so that leaves. It doesn't leave the future up in the air, but it changes things. He was the heart of the network, and so the network has decisions ahead of it. And what little bit I know about it, it's going to be fantastic. The future looks great for the network, for this show. The loss of John is huge in the hearts of the individuals who loved him. I wish I could say more about him or talk more about him, but I didn't know him. I only had just brief encounters with him all over the years. In fact, both of the shows, both iterations of my show, whatever, were arranged by other people, and I was just the person who was lucky enough to have the show idea and the talent, I don't know, the willingness to turn on the microphone and act a fool in any case. And so I've been insulated even there from that, the inner workings of the network. But from what I hear, the good word is that things will be fine. But in relation to donations to the network, again, the network 100% relies on the listeners and the people who truly value the network to support it. And we would hate for anything to happen. So I gather John's death was a shock, of course, but a surprise. It wasn't expected necessarily, and I don't know if anybody else speculated on the idea of why would we be asking you not to donate to the PayPal, just in case. I'm sure that somebody's gone through and removed those links from the website, but in from places that you might otherwise find them, but certainly in archival places, things like that, you may still come across mentions of the PayPal and places like that to donate. It don't do that right now. I assume it's directly related to them being in John's name, things like that, and so it could cause a problem. We'd hate for your donation to the network to get lost in the shuffle somewhere, and because we know that you would donate if you have the money, you have the time, you have the will to listen to and support the network, then you would really want to see that money actually go there. Reach out directly, call the network, talk to somebody in person, and they will point you to what to do in the meantime when it comes to giving a donation to the network. You probably already know this, but I think it's important for me to talk about it. Simply because of the fact that I have been graced with being on this network. You understand my presence here on the network is proof in and of itself of the efforts of John and Sam and Mike and everybody else that is involved, all the hosts, of the commitment to the idea of providing a space for people to come and have real conversations and hash out these ideas in this format, and to let them do what they do. Nobody has ever told me what I have to do on the show. Nobody's ever flipped on the microphone in my headset and said, you shouldn't have said that, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't talk about that. That's never been the case, and I don't expect that it would. And the only time that I would think that it might, being that we try to present a family a presentation across the entirety of the network, would be having conversations about stuff that I don't want to talk to you about anyway. It's none of your business what my love life is, and it's fantastic. So there's a theme today, and that is just sort of not procrastinating and prioritizing some things, and that can be tough to do, and it's tough for me, and I live it every single week, and I live it every single day. All of us do, but in such an open format as I do here for the show and for the network, and the conversations that I have, and the impromptu, this sort of the nature of not really in any way trying to plan out a conversation with the guest, regardless of whether they have a specific thing that they do. I don't can questions. I rarely have any. Everybody's seen and heard those interviews where it's just the same stupid fanboy type question that you get, and you get the same answer, and you see the look on the person's face who's answering. They're like, Jesus Christ, I've answered this question 1,000 times. Why the hell are we still talking about this stupid little thing? Why don't you ask me about me? Why don't you ask me about something that's real to me? And of course, that's usually in terms of people who are in the public eye, and so their core public persona is overknown and sometimes overused, and I think that they appreciate a format where they can just come in and just have a conversation about whatever comes up, and the rest of the you want to plug your stuff, you want to talk about your thing is really, even as much as we'll drop something like a conversation about cruising the Epiphany Highway, the conversations that I have with the good doctor, the healer facilitator, Dean Lloyd, joking last week about him, it being creepy that he listens. And again, joking, creepy that anybody listens to me at all, a little bit. let alone that they take any of it, my advice, because I'm not a billionaire. I'm not that successful guy that you're supposed to listen to, that you're supposed to want to hear from. I'm actually just like you. I'm just a normal dude, a little weird to just listen to yourself, I guess. But maybe that's part of the reason that it works, is because people don't listen to themselves a lot, and it's easier to hear it from somebody else, and particularly somebody else like me, who even in the environment, the self-imposed really environment of protected language or ideas, that limited as they are right here in the presentation, I still tell it like it is. I'm not at all afraid to talk about any topic that has merit and can be presented in such a way as to be helpful sometimes, I guess. I hope that's what the conversations with the good doctor are. I like the fact that he listens to the show, because it means that it's about more. When he comes to visit the show, it's about more than him just talking about cruising the Epiphany Highway and his work there. He wants to talk to me, and he wants to have a conversation about me and the things that I'm talking about and the people that I'm talking to. And he's interested in me. It's not just about a self-serving thing that can happen when you're reaching out to somebody, or they, in this case, reach out to you to get on your platform, to be presented to your audience, and it's not something that I concern myself with. If it's good information, and I'm happy to talk to the individual regardless. I'm happy to help them be self-serving. That's not the point. It's just nice to know that there's a connection, that the idea that I come here each week and generally have a conversation, or I'm open about who I am and why I have the conversations I do, or why I do each week here on the network, why I would take the time. I don't make a dime for doing it. It costs me a bunch of money, and I really, other than trying to sell some T-shirts and some things like that every once in a while, and play around with throwing some auctions and stuff on the social media for some of my reading materials and fun things like that, books that I give away, and I'll drop a business card in there that just says towardanarchy.com on it. Things like that. I'm not reaching out to people in any attempt to push that fundraising at all. I do this because I want to. I do this because I think it's important, and I do it because I'm lucky to be able to. I know that I'm completely blessed, whatever terminology you'd like to use, to be a part of the network and the people who are making the network happen and who've been at the heart of it for all these years. And I'm excited about the future of the network and the future of the show. What little bit I do know about the way things will go, I think it sounds amazing, and I look forward to it, and I hope you'll stick with us. And so at least stick with us for a few more minutes, because we can get through this break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about convincing you to go to towardanarchy.com and not to rib anybody. I don't get the opportunity very often, but just the fact that the network is right there, it's live, and Dallas looking bad today. The Broncos are winning 19-0 third quarter, and they've really been dominating the whole game. Dallas just can't seem to connect at all, and they can't seem to get a running game really going at all. It's sort of just really being dominated by the Broncos. And wow, if I was that guy, my best friend Dwayne, I've mentioned him on the show a number of times. I can't convince him. I don't know why I can't convince him to come be a guest on it. I guess I don't know. I don't understand why. I haven't been able to get that out of him, and so I don't press him about it. He knows that I do it and have been doing it for a long time, that he would always be welcome. We have plenty we talk for hours at a time, and about just anything. But he's He's a Texan. He was born and raised. He's half of his youth, I guess. Let's put it that way, in Texas, and so he's always been a Cowboys fan. And we met after his family moved from Texas to Colorado. We met in junior high, and I most of that time, I'd spent a little time, a few years in Texas already by that time. So having 13, something like that, and spent probably 3 years in Texas, 7 to 10, something like that, off and on, El Paso, Albuquerque, New Mexico, few places, just sort of down there, wherever my mother was following a boyfriend or whatever, wherever. I not try to psychoanalyze my own mother here on the show. Just that's where we ended up, and so I have some connection to the Dallas Cowboys. I remember having a team picture years ago, and it was signed. And this was back when the hat was the man. That was the conversation. That was a long time ago, and even then, he was already something of an old man, if you will. Not many more years before the new regime and sideline appearance of the Dallas Cowboys, and then the 90s Cowboys took over, the Troy Aikmans, all those, and you get to fantastic, amazing team, worthy of America's team label, but not today. So, and as a lifelong Broncos fan, there's some satisfaction. Not a lot. I don't get much out of it. We'll come back. I have an amazing second half of the show planned for you. A bunch of things jotted down here that I need to mention, and I'll point you to towardanarchy.com and get you to like, share, follow, subscribe, and I'll tell you why you should do that when we come back.
This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.
Skinny guy standing on the sidelines getting paid a whole lot of money to keep missing the one play that he's required to make on the field. The kicker for the Broncos keeps missing kicks today, and I guess he missed one last week, and he's falling apart now. They're still winning. Off into hour number 2. It's Toward Anarchy. I'm live and just ripping and having fun. No guest this week because I knew that the guest wasn't going to make it, and I could have, again, shoehorned somebody into the conversation and just talked about whatever, and it would be fine. I'm fine with that. I have useless conversations all the time. I own a comic book shop. I have a lifetime of useless conversations in my head, but that's not really true of anything that I talk about, even in terms of things like the store, the comic books, and there's always a real world lesson within all of those stories. That's why comic books appeal. That's why the movies appeal to people. They're often very simple tales of good versus evil that most people can get, and underlying, it's even deeper. There's even more than that, especially sort of really the 80s with the Alan Moore work, people like that, creating such amazing stuff, Watchmen, where you get to see more about, it's not about muscles and weird bad guys necessarily, because there's almost no bad guys in Watchmen. There's references to them stopping bad guys, but the bad guy is the good guy in Watchmen, and that's sort of storytelling in comics. It really, in that vein, took off from that era and that time, and characters became much more detailed and in depth, and sometimes fall way too far into themselves and destroy themselves, and just like people do, and they have all the same real world problems. It's funny because I'm the pop culture guy like that, and I watch some of these cartoons and things. I notice the changes. I've mentioned Comicsgate before, and there's this thing happening everywhere. It happens in the movies. We've all seen it. We've all had some chance to give some thought to it or some mention to it, and that's this idea of trying to always incorporate whatever new group or idea is hot at the moment into the 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 work that you create, the art that you create for somebody or somebody creates for you that you're consuming, and it ends up being very directed. And one of the great cartoons that I watched for one of the series that everybody's into, Star Wars, it's a series that probably a lot of people have never seen. They have no idea of its relevance to the story. But in watching that series for the entertainment value and trying to find out that Ahsoka is still alive, people don't realize that she never is killed by Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, his apprentice. He never kills her, and I'm sorry if that's a spoiler to those of you who assume that she's dead at some point. She's still there after Return of the Jedi. She's still around after Return of the Jedi, and if you don't watch this one cartoon series that I've seen, you don't know that. But the conversation about that is fun. I get to have that conversation with people. But here's another conversation that's interesting about that. So that cartoon, the main character, there's a number of main characters. It's an ensemble cast, as things like this generally are. I guess really the main character is Ezra Bridger. And boy, it's not me. So my pointing this out isn't about me. It's about an effort. It's this effort of inclusiveness, of trying to make sure that every black man knows that he's represented by a black Batman, by a black Spider-Man. Every Mexican individual knows that there's a Mexican version of Captain Marvel, basically called Miss America. America is her first name. She's Mexican. Just this overall inclusiveness. Well, this with the Rebels cartoon. Rebels is the name of it, if I didn't mention it, and it fills in all this story about leading up to and through the original stories, through the original trilogy, Star Wars 4, 5, and 6, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, which is the stuff that I grew up on. So it's core fanboy geek stuff for me. And but it's one of the few things that ties all of this other stuff together in some way, the prequels and even the Disney stuff. And I don't know if any of it's canon or not. I'm just entertained by it. But in being entertained by it and ending up knowing way too much geeky stuff about Star Wars that I can sit here and talk about it, something else is this inclusiveness. And if you didn't catch it, the kid's name is Ezra. Is anybody with me on the name Ezra? There's a sound, a connotative association, if you will. The name Ezra. It's a Jewish name, right? Am I wrong? Did I miss that somewhere? It's a name associated with Jewish people. The kid has a big nose. Look at all the other characters in the series. His nose is big. And so there's this like weird attempt at inclusiveness that's all kind of almost anti-Semitic at the same time, and it's this underlying thing that every time the kid is on the screen and his big nose is just ski slope, it's God darn it. Yeah, it's literally that ski slope analogy of a nose thing that's going on with this cartoon character, and I'm just like, wow, is that? And then I can't say it's too on the nose because that's too on the nose, and so I just but that's the football game's going on, and they're all marching and cheering death and trying to make you feel bad about these individuals who have sacrificed when they did so voluntarily, right? Our military is a voluntary thing. The whole state worship thing on a Sunday afternoon during the middle of the game. Do you get what that is there? All those dads that this is a typical, picture of the dad on Sunday. He doesn't need to go to church. That 70s dad, another one of those. Homer Simpson, another one. He doesn't want to go to church on Sunday because he doesn't necessarily care or believe in any of it, or for whatever his reasons. So those guys are staying home watching the football game, right? That's the analogy, the cliche, the storyline. And what's happening? They're being presented. Football itself is already religious. Like I have to tell the people in Texas that. Football itself is already very religious, very ceremonial, and it's a battle, and it's a back and forth, and it's strategic, and the people who entertain themselves as fanatical about it and analyze it consider themselves sometimes to be sort of generals and think of themselves as being particularly smart. And they may or may not be. I don't know that football knowledge proves or disproves that either way. I contain quite a bit of football knowledge in terms of how the game works and what works in terms of skill and what's required to make a successful football team. I think I spent a lot of years watching it. The whole presentation is already very much about a rigid standard and a set way of doing things, and there's the NFL is used, whether it's intentionally or not, that's the question, isn't it? Whether it's used intentionally or not, to push the agenda of the state, whether it's the vaccine agenda. A lot of the talk this morning in the pregame shows was about Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is one of a number of people who are potentially endangering or outright sacrificing. I know Emilio Estevez, one of the most recent people to come out. He's had this new series and was back in the Mighty Ducks realm in that area of recognition once again, for whatever that's worth, and in terms of Hollywood recognition. I was always a fan of the Billy the Kid, those movies. So I nothing against Emilio, and then to find out that he's sacrificed returning for a second season to this hit that he's revisiting. He's turning it down because of the COVID vaccination. Ice Cube turned down a $9 million job in a movie. These people are standing up, and there are people who are sacrificing, and Aaron Rodgers was one of them, and that's the narrative, and it's obnoxious. I just want to be entertained by some football, and I'm even willing to entertain listening to the inane chatter of the mostly brain dead people who present the stuff, for information about the game. But I don't want to hear their thoughts on whether or not my bodily autonomy should be up for question at the state house. I don't want to hear anymore that I respect Aaron Rodgers' right to his bodily autonomy, but his bodily autonomy doesn't exist when other people's are at risk. Well, that can be said of anything in regard to the individual's right to bodily autonomy, because it means that I have the right to carry a gun and defend myself against anyone, including clowns in costumes with tin badges, if that becomes necessary. So there's a reason why this is there, why it would be so, and again, on this conversation of it being a case of indoctrination, that's really what I'm trying to get at. And I don't want to let that point go, because I'll get off on talking about my right to defend myself. I'll be talking about Emilio Estevez and his Westerns, and why well, he came up in relation to the conversation with Alec Baldwin, and why somebody might be pointing a gun at a camera or something like, all right, so this relates. Thank you. Remember I mentioned the importance of prioritizing conversations. All right, so I could go on about the conversation about the gun and Alec Baldwin. But I told you when it first happened that if we're talking about that we're already talking about the wrong thing. We're already off the conversation. And this is so obvious in terms of the social media reach and what people think is important, and why we need to change that narrative by making sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, the things that we know are of importance, that aren't about something like Alec Baldwin. When the conversation about the president suggesting maybe it was done on purpose, this connection between the person who was killed and her husband and the Clintons, and just these paper thin ideas about this stuff that, even if they're true, they make absolutely no difference. They make no difference in the world, because you're not using these things to try to convince somebody that government is bad. Is just a weird thing. It's a weird thing, because the Clintons aren't government. The Clintons are just a bunch of gangsters, like the Bushes or the Obamas or the Trumps. They're the gangster family. They're the richest gangster family in charge at the moment. That's all those people are. They're not government. They're not the system. They're not what's going to change something. They're the thing that's keeping you from seeing something needs to be changed. If you're talking about a conspiracy about some president, some former president, some manipulator, and the things that they, as an individual, have participated in manipulating, when the whole thing is a great big manipulation, I think you're missing the point. And I think it's a valid thing for me to talk to you about when the conspiracy theory about Alec Baldwin gets more likes and shares than the conversation about, I can't say vaccines, because it's obvious that's being manipulated. I can show you the evidence. I can go right now as I'm talking and log in to the Republic Broadcasting Network page on social media, on Facebook, where all these things are kept, and I can show you how that, the Alec Baldwin thing will get 1,300 likes or something like that, or just notices. Somebody saw it, somebody interacted with it. They clicked on it to finish reading the rest of the post, or they clicked on the picture to see the rest of the picture. And and the conversation about vaccines gets 6. When we know that there's not any, I don't think there's anybody across this network or people listening to it that probably support vaccination. I have yet to meet one. I'm sorry if you're that one. If you are, but I would think that you're listening to the network and the people who are on it, probably because they're talking about such things, and you might be leery of it, so you might want to listen up when we're talking about it, and a whole bunch of people don't want to do it, and this is all part of the things that they're talking about punishing an Aaron Rodgers for standing up for his bodily autonomy, and that the idea that he can, this is what led off into the almost going off into the Second Amendment thing, that he puts somebody else in danger when somebody else can take the same measures that they're trying to insist upon him to protect themselves. That's the thing that they're trying to say. You must protect other people. You must protect yourself by taking this shot. Well, there's no evidence to suggest that any of that is true. How can it be when the shot supposedly reduces the symptoms almost to the point that you can't even tell that you have symptoms? So that makes you dangerous. That makes you potentially carrying, pushing around a virus that you have, and you don't know that you have it. That's obviously a problem. The whole commercial, you're gonna get me. Okay, so we'll go into the commercial. I'll come back. I'll wrap up this little thought, and many more to come. I would finish the thought, which is not something that I'm always wont to do or even capable of doing, because I can tangent real easy. All these things tie together, and that sort of proves a narrative when you can watch these things and see. There's a pattern to the Matrix. I hate to use such pop culture terms, but it's a very apt description of our reality. Once you see the code, you can't turn it off. You can't voluntarily turn it off. You see it everywhere. And it's not like seeing the number 24. You're not inserting it in there. It exists. Then the question is why does it exist? Is it because it's agenda driven, or is it because this person really believes that, or are they just saying it to go along with the herd? These are probably the 3 basic questions when you must concern yourself with where that particular statement or idea on something comes from. And when it comes from the Fox Sports Sunday morning team, and they're telling me that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have his own body autonomy because he plays on a team with other people, that when did that become untrue? When did his body and his injuries stop the rest of the team from playing, or his health decisions stop the rest of the team from playing? They may not perform as well because he's not there, but that's not the same thing at all as saying that it was part of reducing that ability to perform or something like that, whatever nonsense you might attribute to it. But the idea that these people that are around him can take this thing that supposedly works, vaccinated just as likely to spread Delta variant within household as unvaccinated. I read that in The Hill when I saw it. But that's been the case all along. Again, they talk about the vaccine being 99% effective, or whatever effective rate that it's supposed to be at, or that only less than 1% of people are dying, or whatever number it is they throw at you. It's all they're either looking at it from the wrong side, or they're just flat out fudging the numbers. What was it this week about Pfizer coming out and fudging their studies that ended up putting their numbers up higher? Well, I tell you that it's all complete BS. That when you look at, they had to fudge to get those numbers. It's sort of 0.07% death rates and things like that. It's already close to that naturally anyway. So there's this weird disconnect, this thing that exists. But these people are on there saying that they can take the vaccine, they can wash their hands, they can do all these same things that they would have an Aaron Rodgers do, or Kyrie Irving do, or Ice Cube, or Emilio Estevez, or any of these people. There are many of them in Hollywood and entertainment, standing up saying that they won't perform in places that discriminate. Let's be honest, that discriminate against people who've been vaccinated and unvaccinated. This ridiculous disconnect that exists, that the unvaccinated are going to have to be tested all the time because they're not vaccinated. Well, the vaccinated don't have to be tested all the time, even though they can spread as much. I would say, if your lies are true, that it makes the symptoms just sort of disappear almost. That's a bad thing. That's not a good thing. That's the vaccine actually doing more damage to the population in that terms. I can't believe that it's so transparent, but that's it. That's people have to prioritize, and finding out about the importance of vaccines isn't a priority on their list until their child has a seizure in the backseat of the car. It happens. A lot more than you think. The NFL, I want to just watch this game, and I can't. They're telling me that I have to take the vaccine because it's better for everybody else. They're telling me that I have to worship the state, that the sacrifice of those people is on me and was for me, but I didn't have any of the decisions. I didn't even pay taxes to help fund their going over there. I had nothing to do with it, and I benefited from it in no way. I could argue that I've had to pay the price, possibly in some ways. All right, more to talk about. We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy. Throwing the helmet down. The Dallas is just imploding. I know it's football. It's nothing, but it's just kind of fun to get into that the competition thing and poke your fun at your friends who support that team. I mean, I get it. I get the camaraderie and the fun that comes with it, and I talked about how my best friend Dwayne is a Cowboys fan, so I just imagine as I'm sitting here talking to you, talking to him and just really ribbing him about it, because they really are. Dallas really is a good team. The fact that they're not able to put anything together. It's failures on both sides of the ball today. I mean, it's kind of inexplicable, but I bet real Dallas Cowboys fans, honest ones, honest in the game, they understand it. I'm sure they know things like ages of quarterbacks and who's not on the field and who should be on the field, and all those intricate little things that make the difference when it comes down to that team play. But the Broncos just intercepted. The Dallas was driving, and it just intercepted, and just that has to be frustrating when it's just not working. I mean, I know I'm familiar, but not in a team context like that, where it just infects everybody. But I understand the theory and why it happens, and so it's one of the things that I really encourage you to consider. It's something that Dr. Dean Lloyd and I were talking about a little bit last week, just this idea of putting out positive energy, good thoughts, because you see it right there. They all get down and they start, the team leaders, the guys that are to be looked up to, the best players on the team, throwing their helmet at the bench in frustration because it's just not going right, and you're losing 27-0, and you just threw an interception, and they just got a touchdown, and it's just getting further and further out of reach with less than 10 minutes left in the game, and how it just infects the whole thing. Your energy is palpable. The things that you put out to the world is palpable. And so you want to, hopefully, if for no other reason than the benefit of those immediately around you that you love, that you not put out toxic thoughts, that you not throw out toxic ideas. And I have to really be careful in this because I'm very vocal about anything at all, let alone how people should act in a moral sense toward each other, and what a good person is. Whereas we think of somebody who doesn't procrastinate, somebody who thinks of things and prioritizing things on a piece of paper is a good person. They're looked up to. They write books and they tell you this is the thing that we do. And sure, it works for some people. Some people it doesn't. I guess maybe the football game again is still a really good example of that, because it's oftentimes very scripted. Sometimes the entire game is scripted, depending on the team. I don't think that's such a problem as it may have been in the past, but there are oftentimes very scripted plays, and they're handled in a certain way, and you can expect a certain activity out of a team, especially if you study them a little bit. So you can study, and you can prepare, and you can prioritize. Isn't it amazing how this stuff just ends up coming together? It helps me. It encourages me, because it shows that even though I do tangent and I talk about other things, and I'm distracted by comic books and dogs and whatever it is, that I can come back and do the things that are important. Remember to pick up. It may take me a long time to get there. Sometimes weeks. It may take me a while. But realizing that so much of it is so not important, that the only things that matter from day to day is that the family is housed and fed. That's it. That's it. Those are the only things that matter from day to day. And then there's all kinds of potential little offshoots from that. Hopefully, if you're playing the game right, that start with you. Because you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else. That's a fact. You have to be solid in, or as solid as one can be. We're often not as solid as anyone, but as solid as you can be before you try to manage, I don't know if that's the right word, others, guide. All right, there we go. That's a better word, I think. Guide comes to mind. That I like that word, but it certainly applies in parenting, where my own approach to parenting has been as a guide, someone who offers advice and is pretty definite about these ideas, but I still, you get to do what you get to do. And so you can plan, you can study, you can be who you are, up at 9 a.m. every day, to the gym, do all this, And man, so much of it is still out there in the open and up in the air, and things that you can't control. And so if you you overpressure yourself and individuals, the people around you, the people who probably that you care about the most, and cause stress and problems where they needn't be, because you're expecting or living up to an expectation that is beyond what is necessary for just getting along and being happy, for just simply surviving, if you will. Now, maybe that's not right, because surviving oftentimes suggests that anything else can be sacrificed to survive, and I would suggest the opposite of that. I think that your survival is much more guaranteed, much more. There's a longer shelf life to it, a longer half life to it, if you are working together, and people love you, and people care for you, and are concerned about you, and want to have conversations with you, want to do things with you, and help you become a better person. So I guess my whole thought on it is that overanalysis leads to paralysis. That's one I hadn't thought of in a long time, but it just comes to mind to me right now. And I don't remember the first time I heard that. I don't know who said it to me. And things that are alliterative like that often are sort of silly. But some of the most simple concepts really are those things. And too much preparation leads to too many decisions leading up to, going through whatever experience you're going through. Like, to talk about the gaming, talk about being a part of the team, an adventurer. Another great piece of advice I always understood, don't remember when I heard it, must have been very young, but it was the idea that you didn't, I bet I do know, is Robert Lynn Aspirin, I bet, in the not the Fool's Company books, but the Myth Adventures books, where Skeeve, the junior magician, the apprentice, wants to learn. He wants to be a thief when he first starts out, and so he wants to learn magic to help his thievery. But he also wants to be proficient in a sword or a weapon and things like that. And it's explained to him why you would want to specialize in a case like that, because you would freeze at the moment. He wants to carry a sword specifically when they're walking around the bazaar. Wow, I can't believe I remember all this after all these years. It's been many, many, many years since I read these books. I was a kid. But they're walking around the bazaar. It's on a different planet, the bazaar on Diva, right? And he wants to carry a sword. He wants to look like he's a fighter too. And his teacher Oz, this now powerless magician from another dimension, because a trick was played on him when he was called over through the pentagram, lost his powers. He's carrying a sword. Well, he knows how to use one. He knows, but he's long lived. He's had time to study all these things, and relative to a human, for sure, we only just have so much time to learn so many things. And his thought was, you didn't want to be confused about which tool you would use when you go into battle. So if you know how to cast fireballs or whatever it is, conjure up something magically, but you also have a sword, and you run into a combat situation, particularly one that's new to you, especially if you're young and an apprentice, you don't know what do I do? Do I go for my sword? Do I cast a web spell? What do I do? And that resonated with me from a very young age. Clearly those books did too. Amazing story, very funny, fun books. Robert Lynn Aspirin was a great author. It just resonated with me that just another a simple idea. Too much preparation doesn't give you the ability to be flexible. It doesn't give you the ability, the tools necessarily to deal with things that go wrong. And that's one of the things of over prioritizing and over scheduling and over studying something, is that you're attempting to place all of everything that could happen, everything that you could understand about it, into one small box. And you can't do that. It's the problem with the law. It's the problem with writing down, codifying rights. It's the same thing. You can't put everything into this little box when it just doesn't fit. There's so much more than what goes into the box, so much more that needs to be considered. And so the law should be flexible and should not take into consideration much more than the details of the reality of the case, the facts of the case. That's how the real law is handled. That's how everybody handles and adapts to a real situation, is you adjust to it as it goes along. I expected yesterday to spend about 20 minutes on each side pulling off the wheel assemblies on the car. And I knocked the first one out. Of course, the bearing was broken, so it just popped right off of there. It was really, hey, I just made money. Isn't that great? And I did just before the show too. It just popped right off because the bearing was broken anyway, so no big deal. I expected that. Boom, 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 done. Go over to the other side. Should probably do all four, but I just did the two rear ones. And go to pop the other one off, and it didn't want to come off, and it took a while. It took, I had to get out the separating oil and spray and let it soak in and give it a gentle tap. Sure, we'll call it a gentle tap with my rubber mallet, my $1 rubber mallet from the Mile High Flea Market. It just connects, it took much longer on the one side. What should have been that boom, 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 a plan, prioritize. Boy, if I'd had anything, if I promised somebody else my time, which I try never to do, I promised somebody else my time at that time, I wouldn't have been able to make it. I wouldn't have been finished with what I had done. So, you have to do what works for you. When it comes down to it, you need to do as much or as little planning as works for you. That's my takeaway from the whole thing. I'm talking to myself, but I'm talking to you at the same time. I'm not afraid to. I've never been afraid to, and I don't think there's any reason either way that I can't or shouldn't change that, other than I continue to be me and do that, and it continues to work. Continues to work just fine. TowardAnarchy.com. Like, share, follow, subscribe. I haven't thrown that at you enough. I'm going to do it for the last few minutes of the show. I'm going to keep saying go to TowardAnarchy.com. November 7th is what you're looking for. If you're not live, if you're not right there, if it's moved off the front page, click episodes, click 2021, click November. We just got into November. It'll be right there, November 7th. Click on that, and you'll see I was talking about procrastinating and prioritizing, and I apologize if you got something out of it. I didn't mean for that to happen. There was no intention for you to learn something today. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. It works differently for everybody. It's a metaphor, I guess, for everything that the show is about. You have to do what works for you, preferably voluntarily. Links I shared up there, I'll talk with as I'm getting out of the show, as we're falling out of the show. Some great things, some stuff about the Second Amendment, a new Maine law that's interesting, that makes it it's a right to food amendment that they just passed here in this last election, that it really guarantees, as much as any piece of paper or law does, that they get to grow and harvest and consume their own food, and there's even some protections for seeds. That link is there. Jerome Powell says that the Great Resignations and the labor shortage are healthy, and he's kind of right, and of course, because things like that, manipulated or not, will weed out the leftovers. The people that, when you manipulate the the value of an individual's hour through something like the minimum wage. When you change that, whether it's natural, whether it's forced, a whole bunch of people have done it here recently, displaces people. You separate the wheat from the chaff. There you go. And to use a terrible analogy, we will be right back. We'll wrap it up, and I'll tell you about a couple more things there at towardanarchy.com. So Nikki Haley this week said, I think it was this week at some point, I didn't catch exactly when she said, I just caught the little headline and tried to capture the thought in my mind, as I often do, if not quite literally on my phone, which that happens at times too, but this was just in my head that she called for a cognitive test for older politicians, and I thought it was funny because I had a conversation earlier in the week with people at the comic book shop about the age of the people that the gang members up there on Capitol Hill. They're kind of old. All of them are. But here I would just say that anybody who wants to be president at all, or elected official of any kind, should be open to and subjected to, in fact, a battery of different psychological tests that are made publicly available, and that we don't have to actually hear from them. That we just that wouldn't be a good idea either. That's another one of these things of just trying to put everything into a box. You can't. It doesn't work that way. You can't put all of the little things into one little box. But everybody who wants to rule over somebody needs a cognitive test. They need a criminal background check and a whole bunch of things. Because there's something wrong with a large portion of them. There's this small portion of them that get into it out of some altruistic notion, but they're quickly disabused of that idea right away. It's no. Most of them, some of them will put in a lot of years trying to make some change, but nothing ever changes. It's a system itself that will never change. That's the problem with that. So the participation in it is pretty limited. Even if you get something like the story that I shared there, towardanarchy.com, look for November 7th, just some last thoughts on getting in there and looking at these links and sharing them, and make it as easy as possible for you to do so. Like, share, follow, subscribe, wherever we're at. Wherever you see the show at, wherever you see the network at, that's how good information gets shared. That's how somebody like an Aaron Rodgers or even a Joe Rogan can get good information and question and let others have the ability, the right, the absolute natural response to let other people just be who they are and make their own decisions, and you make yours based on the way you believe it is, and that this idea that we protect each other's health. There's no, herd immunity is theory. It's theory based on cattle. It's not humans. We're different. There's so many reasons. I encourage you to check out November 7th. There's this great meme that collects all these different headlines about COVID and how it's just back and forth. I've tried to represent on just speaking it here, but this image shows it a lot better. And there's so much more. Share it with your friends, and we'll be back next week. Until then, take care.